You're live.
Okay, welcome back, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions. It is Friday, the 13th of February, and we also have a Friday, the 13th in March, too. So 2 months in a row. This is Friday afternoon, a little bit after 12 o'clock, and we are picking up our work on H 549, as well as language is being proposed by the Department of Motor Vehicles that is over in a Senate bill in Senate Transportation that pertains to DOC and the ability of folks who are incarcerated to receive non-driver ID, as well as, if they are eligible, that they could receive a driver's license prior to help them when they are released from incarceration. We have with us our legal counsel, as well as a representative from DOC, Monique Sullivan, who's on YouTube, on Zoom, and also Nancy Prescott from DMV, who's been living in our committee a little bit the past few days. I think the best thing to do with you, Damien, is, well, to start at the beginning of the proposed draft 2.1. Right now, and I'm just going to kind of lay this out for Damien and Hillary, weigh in. Right now, what we are looking at in our bill, H 549, which people need both copies, language for comparison. What we have been proposing in 549 is currently a person who is sentenced and has served for 6 months is eligible for a non-driver ID card. And that's the current law. And our first proposal was to also extend that to detainees who have been in a correctional facility prior to adjudication for 6 months. And so they could get a non-driver ID card. Current law does not specify if it's a non-real ID or a real ID, non-driver ID card. Yeah. So that's where we were, just to extend the ability for detainees to have access to a non-driver ID card. That's where we were. I think we had a general agreement in the committee to do that. Okay. So in the meantime, DMV proposed in draft 2.1 only talks about sentence folks, that they could, upon submission of a documentation required for a non-real ID or a real ID identification card. So that's the difference right there. And Damien, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you for the introduction here. For the record, I'm Damon Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel.
Confused, we're in trouble.
So you've got a couple of different things that are on the table, but from the miscellaneous DMV bill perspective, what it's proposing to do is to expand the existing program that DOC and DMV have, which allows a person who's been sentenced to receive a non-driver identification card when their sentence is done, is to expand that so that they could also, in certain circumstances, get a driver's license or a learner's permit. And so those circumstances are that they have an unexpired driver's license, or that it is expired for the driver's license less than 3 years prior, for the learner's permit less than 2 years prior. And so this basically allows, if they had it going in, they can come back out with what they had when they were sentenced. Of course, if they'd been in for longer than that and their driver's license has been expired for, let's say, 10 years or even 5 years, then they're going to have to go through the process of applying for it again. But this would allow them in certain circumstances to come back out with a driver's license instead of getting a non-driver ID and then having to go back to the DMV to get a driver's license. So that's what that would do. The initial language, as I drafted it, inadvertently swept in detainees. And that has been clarified now in the current draft. So it's just individuals who have been sentenced, not individuals who are awaiting sentencing or awaiting trial. So that's been clarified. My understanding is that you also had a bill which was to expand the non-driver ID program to detainees. I would defer to my colleague, Hillary, to speak to that. But with respect to the other identification questions, I can answer questions about the real ID and non-real ID program, which gets complicated because there we're subject to federal law and federal requirements. And so that throws a little bit of a wrench into everything. So what we end up with is the same credential for state purposes, but there are two different versions. There's the federally compliant or real ID compliant identification under federal regulations. And then there's the non-real ID, which is still usable for state purposes, but not usable for federal purposes. And that includes getting a stamp at the top that provides something to the effect that the card is not acceptable for official purposes or not for identification purposes. It means you cannot fly with it. You can't use it to get into a federal property. And there are a couple of other instances, but basically it's not a good federal ID. It's fine for the state. So you have a state operator's license that's a non-real ID. Either you didn't have all of the paperwork and information you needed to meet the real ID requirements, or perhaps you chose not to share that with the state government, which is your right. Then you get a non-real ID. You can still drive your car, but you can't use it to board a plane. You can't use it to go into the federal building. Does that make sense?
So where does that makes sense for the driver's license?
Mm-hmm.
How does that play out for the non-driver ID card?
So the non-driver ID card, if you think about it this way, the federal law says that if you choose not to get the real ID compliant state identification card, and I'm just going to call it the state.
So the state recognizes a non-driver license.
Yep. So we have
a state identification card.
That's right. So you can use that at a local store. Say you're writing a check and they want to see an ID. You can use that. Say you're going to the bar and they want to check your age, or you're buying beer at the store. You can use that as an identification card for those purposes. What you can't do is use it to board a plane, go to a federal building, et cetera. So it basically, they have allowed states to elect to have identification cards that don't meet the federal requirements, under the caveat that you can have these, they just can't be used for any of the federal purposes that we're requiring a real ID. And so you can tell on your own ID card, if you have a little circle with a star in it on the upper right-hand side, that means you've got a real ID compliant card. If you don't, that means that you, for whatever piece of documentation it was, you didn't submit all the documentation needed to get a real ID.
So for a non-driver ID, regardless if it's a non-real ID or a real ID, would be used for identification purposes in the state, except to enter into a federal building or to board a plane.
There are some other federal areas where federal ID is required. Those are the two that come to mind off the top of my head,
Right.
but I don't want to.
But it's both for the non-real ID and the real ID non-driver license,
Yes.
right? Non-driver ID,
Yeah. So let's just say an ID card that's either
non or real.
real ID or non-real.
They're the same.
It's the same for your sort of state and local purposes. but one is acceptable for federal purposes where a federally compliant ID is required, and one is not.
So the real ID for a non-driver ID could get you into those federal buildings?
It will be acceptable as a form of identification. That doesn't guarantee you entrance, but yeah.
And I'm assuming you could register to vote with that?
You can register to vote with any of these at the DMV. That's an option when you go through at the DMV to register to vote, to designate yourself as an organ donor. Those are options that are on the application. I actually just renewed my ID across the street. I had a wonderful experience. But those were all questions I was asked as I was renewing my driver's license across the street. So
You can register.
Gina and then Kevin?
You could use the non-real ID though to pick up a prescription?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's your final question.
yeah,
And when you said you can use a non-real ID to register to vote, is that strictly state or state and federal?
so the registration to vote is when you're at the DMV and you're applying for this, one of the options is that they can register you to vote. There are other ways, and I don't know if that applies to federal elections. I'm not an elections lawyer, unfortunately.
Still be on the checklist.
You would be on the checklist. I don't know if it would affect, I would want to ask my colleagues who cover elections law if this affects your ability to vote in a federal election. There are other ways, other forms of ID that you could provide too, like a passport for something like that. Although if you've already got a passport, I mean, again, it could be a personal reason why you choose not to provide that documentation. But yeah.
So for the non-real ID, non-driver card, what documentation does DMV need?
Nancy, are you able to answer this off the top of your head? Because I'll have to look.
Yeah, could you?
I'm Nancy Prescott, Director of Operations for DMV. The identifications that you need to provide is residency, social security, as well as a certified birth certificate or valid passport. Is what we're looking for. You do not necessarily need to provide the valid passport if you don't have one.
One or the other.
That's correct.
So you need proof of residency, social security number, either the birth certificate or passport. So for a person who's incarcerated, and Monique, weigh in here at any time. So a person who is incarcerated that wants a non-driver ID, I'm just breaking this down. I'm not getting into licenses yet, but for a non-driver ID, for a non-real ID, do they need those documentations?
For a non-real ID, for DOC.
For DMV to get a non-real ID for a non-driver ID, do they need those same documentations? Do you need those same documentations?
So what we don't need is a citizenship for non-real ID, and we do need citizenship for real
So
ID.
you don't need the birth certificate or passport?
Not for non-real ID, my apologies.
Okay, I just want to be,
Yeah.
I'm starting
It's the
from scratch here.
Piece and component of it, you do not need to provide for that.
So for the non-ID, ID card, what DMV needs is proof of residency and social security number. For the real ID, non-driver ID, you need those two plus birth certificate or passport. So the process for DOC is to provide those documents, know which one the offender wants. If they want a non-real or a real ID for a non-driver ID card, I would assume DOC needs to find out from the offender which one they want. And then DOC has those documentations that they then submit to DMV for whichever one. Is that correct, Monique?
Yes, we asked them.
Could
Excuse
you
me,
just identify yourself for the record?
I'm sorry. Monique Sullivan, Department of Corrections, Facility Operations Manager. So we asked the individual which kind of ID they would like, and then the documents that we are able to get are a social security card and a birth certificate if the person was born in Vermont. And that's what we can provide to the DMV.
So how does DMV then verify the residency?
DOC currently provides all of that for us in order for us to, under our current program.
The
For inmates.
for the residency, we just were able to provide the address that the individual is going to release to that's been approved. But there's obviously no electric bill with your name on it or anything like that. It's just DOC saying this person is approved to live at this address.
And you provide that information, send it over to DMV. DMV processes it, and you produce the card at DMV's nickel, which is
That is correct.
$3. This is done prior to release for someone who's sentenced.
Correct?
How much prior to their release? Is it about a month prior to the date that they're due to be released?
Two
2
months.
months? So that's the process for folks who are sentenced. So if we expand this to detainees, which was the bill originally, and we did not delineate non-real ID or real ID for the non-driver ID card, by incorporating detainees to be able to access the non-real ID and the real ID for non-driver ID card, is there any issues on DOC's end or DMV's end? This is for detainees. And one thing that we talked about was that the documentation that would be needed, DOC would collect it and keep it with the detainee. And then when they were released, that information would go with the detainee, and the detainee could go to DMV to get their non-driver ID. And that would still be able to be worked through with the non-real ID and the real ID?
DOC is still only able to get the birth certificate and social security card. And we would also be able to provide probably a form letter that we will create that says this individual has been incarcerated from this date to this date. And this
So
is
you
the
wouldn't be
address they're
able-
going to.
So you wouldn't be able to provide the residency?
We can, whatever we need to create the form. So if we need to put the residency on there and DMV will accept that from DOC as, yes, this is where a person's going to live, then sure.
And would DMV be able to accept that?
Yes, we administratively, also, I believe you guys are proposing to do is to add to our current process and our new proposed wording to include licenses and permits to detainees.
No, not that. No,
The detainees would then be a different administrative process between DOC and DMV.
the only way we're looking to expand the sentence to detainees is for the non-driver ID, not for their driver's license and not for their permit. It is only for the non-driver ID. That's why I'm taking it in steps so that we understand it's only for the non-driver ID that we were looking in our bill to extend to detainees. Troy.
I agree with you. I get that's what we initiated. Is there any reason, and perhaps there is, why we don't just tack on detainees to the new process?
I don't want to get there yet.
Okay.
I want people to understand what we're doing with the non-driver ID first. I want folks to understand that first. So the process is laid out. We would have to have language, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong. Oh, God, then we get into definition. This is the other piece we're gonna have to struggle with.
You got individuals.
Yeah, this is just the definition of an inmate or offender and that mess.
Yeah, we can true up that terminology based on whatever this committee
We have
decides,
definition in law of an offender and definition in law of an inmate.
right? And just to,
I don't want to go there yet.
yeah, okay. I'll stay away.
Yes, you and me both.
Do we need any language in statute to lay out for detainees the process of how DOC gets that information? How the detainee gets that information to DMV, or should we be silent on that?
I would say that under the current law, we are not prescriptive in how they transfer that. My general recommendation is that if you're going to get prescriptive, the extent of that prescription should be they shall agree on a process. Because as their IT systems, personnel, other procedures change, we don't want to have to come back to this every couple of years.
No kidding.
Update. So I would say limit any prescription on the process there to at most. My recommendation would be to limit it to at most requiring them to reach an agreement on how to do it. The current statute basically sets out that DOC inquires during reentry planning, and then the Department of Corrections coordinates with DMV to provide the identification card. I'm not sure you need more than that. It's already requiring them to coordinate with each other and to engage, and then they can have an MOU that sets out the parameters for that coordination.
And that's in number 2 on page 7 of 549.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's subdivision. Well, in the existing law, it's M1, M2, M3, and M2 and 3 lay out the process there, reentry planning and coordination.
So if we include the non-real ID and the real ID for those non-driver ID, which any changes to 2 or 3 that you're seeing? Either one of our lawyers.
Yeah, if you're there is let me just see, got 326 open.
3 is clear. If the individual desires a non-driver ID card, DOC will coordinate with DMV to provide an identification card for the individual at the time of release.
Yeah, the only proposed change that has come up with respect to the existing language, if you don't expand it to detainees that I'm aware of from the work in the transportation committees, is just clarifying the documentation for either a non-real ID or a real ID.
That's my next question for that. Sure.
At the time of release may need to be tweaked there too, because we're talking about sending them to DMV with.
That's what I'm kind of wondering, but that's where your process is between DOC and DMV. And do we want to be prescriptive in that process in statute? That's my question.
I think you can maybe stop it at facilitate the acquisition of an ID card rather than at the time of release, because we know it's not going to be at the time of release, especially for detainees.
I mean, that language there, you could,
There
I mean,
isn't,
you can,
there is not a reentry plan for detainees.
right. So I think I'm gonna defer to you. Sorry. Yeah.
Hillary Chutter Ames, Office of Legislative Counsel. My understanding of what the committee has previously discussed is that because of the nature of detainees, they will need the documentation to be provided by DOC when they are released or available for them afterwards in a way that DOC gets them their documents now or their personal property now. If that's correct, to make that change in statute, I think the suggestion would be to leave subsection M the way it is currently written, because as currently written, or with whatever tweak the motor vehicle bill requests for DMV reasons, but to leave that as is for purposes of who it covers.
For sentenced
For
individuals.
sentenced individuals
Got
for
it.
more than 6 months, yep. And then to add a subdivision or a subsection afterwards.
For detainees.
That would specify for detainees who is going to get them the documents, and the DOC will obtain the documents as practicable and then provide them at the time of release. And I think in that subsection, if the committee wants to add agree on process language or similar, that could be a place to do it.
Does that work for folks? Okay, so Hillary, if you could start drafting that, so then the question will be within that section. Well, before I go there. If we accept the language in M1, the current law, that is very clear that the submission of documentation is required for non-real ID, a real ID identification card, wherever, like in 2, where we use the non-driver identification card. And then in 3, we say identification card for the individual. Do we need to also say that it's a non-real ID or real ID? Carry that language through in current law?
I don't know that you necessarily do. I think it's implied. If you want to, do the belts and suspenders approach, you could. I'm not sure that it's necessary. We could say provide the, appropriate identification card. Maybe that's not the right word, but I mean,
I
what are your
just,
thoughts?
because in 1, we're being very clear that the documentation required for non-real ID or real ID identification card, then later on, we just say non-driver identification card.
One way to think about it is that when you're drafting a statute, it's worth specifying where it makes a difference. So in subdivision 1, because the documentation required is different for those 2 kinds, it's worth specifying both of the kinds. For 2 and 3, there isn't a difference, right? We're talking about the individual's desire to obtain any kind of non-driver identification card, whatever kind they're eligible for. And if they want any kind, then DOC and DMV shall coordinate to provide whatever they're eligible for and have the documents for, right? Like, I think 2 and 3 have useful generality for purposes of what 2 and 3 are talking about.
I just want to be clear. I just want to be clear for folks, okay? So if we agree that we set up a separate section for detainees for the non-driver ID, what are you smiling at?
She just said that 5 times better than I could. Appreciating that.
But we're a team. We're a team.
Do you want to come down to transportation too?
So we set up another section that deals particularly with just detainees and for the non-driver ID. Do we want to specify in statute a little bit of what that process is, that DOC would like prepare the packet, have it available for the detainee for them to take to DMV after their release? Do we want to be that strict? Or do we want to say, similar to what it is, on number 3, on page 7, lines 17 through 20, if the individual desires a non-driver ID, DOC will coordinate with DMV. So which one do we want? Be more prescriptive or be a little bit broader?
Yeah, well, I don't work at either place and I don't want to revisit this.
Could I clarify one thing? Is the intention, I guess maybe this is a question. If DOC is obtaining for detainees, if DOC is obtaining the documentation required for a non-real ID or real ID, non-driver identification card, and providing it to the individual at release to take to DMV, what coordination would DMV and DOC have for the detainee non-driver identification cards, or is that just something that DOC is doing?
Yeah, there's like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge here, like, I have this from DOC, and then DMV knows, okay, this is a DOC situation, what is that wink, wink, nudge, nudge, right?
It's an
Or
MOU,
detainees.
an MOU that we would work out our process of what that prescriptive plan looks like, which we believe now, just while we're working through it, it would look like they're gonna be coming and supplying DMV with a specific letterhead with specific information that states that they are under that program, along with their documents that we.
So there is still some understanding or coordination between DMV and DOC.
So we need some language to that effect.
Exactly.
Okay. So are we clear on the non-driver ID and who gets it, how they get it, and what it is? Okay, now, before we go to the next section, which deals with renewing driver's licenses and permits. If you go to current law on page 7, it's M2. Current law. And this is for folk, I'm not even gonna go into definition of offender or inmate at this point. But if we go to number 2, lines 13 through 16, this is current law. For folks who are sentenced and they're being released, the individual's desire to obtain a non-driver ID card or any driving credential, if available, if eligible, which means they could go for a driver's license, and inform the individual about the differences between the non-driver ID and a driver's license, including any cost to the individual. So the intent of that language, when we put it in, if they wanted to get a driver's license, they could do so with this same process, but they would have to pay for it. So that's a little bit in conflict with the language that DMV is proposing.
I don't know that it necessarily is, because
I don't know, is it or not?
including any costs could be zero.
But we were clear that if anyone, because in the testimony when we did this a few years ago, DMV is picking up the cost for the ID cards. They're not picking up the cost for the driver's license.
But you're proposing to now.
So I want to make sure that we're not in conflict.
So there, if you think back to the testimony from a week or two ago when you were,
It's gonna
when all of us were in here on this, there are potential costs related to getting some of these documents, especially if they're have to be gotten from out of state. And so that is one of the potential costs that's still there, even if the driver's license or learner's permit are now at no cost. So you may still need to pay money to get a certified copy of a birth certificate or something like that.
Could I clarify something on that?
Go ahead,
We-
Monique.
We only are able to get a birth certificate for someone who was born in Vermont, not someone who was born in another state.
Even with no money being like, even if someone was to give you money to do that.
We've tried with several different states. Whenever a new state pops up, we try, and they won't provide the information.
If the offender themselves reached out to that state, would they provide it to that person, seeing that the person's incarcerated? It's just that DOC is asking instead of the person, right?
Right. I'm not sure that we've asked that, but we certainly could find out.
So Damien, for what's in current language for someone who could get a driver's license while they're incarcerated, a sentenced person,
Mhm.
that is not in conflict with the new DMV language.
I don't think so, because I think what you're saying here is you're inquiring with them about their desire to obtain one of these credentials, regardless of whether it's the non-driver ID under this section or one of the other driving credentials. And even if we add in the language from DMV, that's not going to change. what I think I would suggest is that with S326, and I know I'm getting ahead of you here, is just making sure the language lines up where it's, inquire with them about getting a operator's license or another credential. And I just saying that I think it's important that that language lines up, just so that if you have a person who's looking at the statute rather than an internal policy based on the statute, that they can look at it and say, I'm supposed to be asked about getting a driver's license or other credential from the DMV, or I'm supposed to ask about providing a driver's license or other credential. So that regardless of where they turn, I know that in the motor vehicle world, it is sometimes confusing to people that driver's licenses and non-driver IDs are 4 chapters apart. And the non-driver ID is in a chapter that doesn't have any indication that it's going to have non-driver IDs in it. It's kind of a miscellaneous chapter. And so some folks I've gotten questions before, where do I find the law on the non-driver IDs? Because people look for where the driver's licenses are and they can't find it. So I think it's helpful to have that cross-reference if you have a layperson or administrator trying to read the law and understand things.
You and Hillary can figure that out.
Yeah, we can clarify that.
So let's go to the proposed language. So I'll make sure there's nothing else in 549. Let's go to the proposed language in draft 2.2. That's for replacement license.
And so that should be the same as
Yeah, that's in your.
S326 as it was introduced. And it's also the same as draft 1.1 of the committee's strike all amendment that was introduced this morning.
Right there.
Yeah.
So what I'll do, because we may have, depending on where you're looking at this, we may have different page numbers and line numbers.
Go with this.
I'll go with the sections. So with section 2, the replacement licenses.
Yep.
For this one here, I think at the start of C1, what's become clear to me just listening in is that Hillary and I need to work on the language there, and I need to get something that aligns with whatever you decide on for the defined term for an individual who's been sentenced.
Right. We're not talking about detainees here at all.
No, this is just individuals who have been sentenced.
That's written. That's what it.
Yeah.
So the committee's clear on this.
And so on the third line of that existing subsection there, you'll see that you have to either hold an unexpired license or have held a Vermont operator's license that expired not more than 3 years prior. So if you had another state's driver's license, you're not covered by this. It is just for folks who held a Vermont license.
So this is a question that I asked the other day, and it's more, I think it's more DOC than DMV. Person comes in, I don't know if I can phrase this correctly. They have a valid driver's license. They come into corrections. And they're there for maybe a year, and within that year, their driver's license expired.
Mhm.
And then they get sentenced. So say it got expired exactly a year after they were incarcerated. They get a sentence for 5 years. Okay? So the driver's license has been expired. They would have, so then their ultimate sentence, well, that's not going to work because their ultimate sentence will be 4 years. So 2 years into their incarceration, they could apply.
The way the language is currently, it doesn't specify
But it's
any
within that
specific-
3-year.
Yeah, right. It doesn't specify any specific time during their sentence
Right.
when this would have to take place. It doesn't say like within 6 months of release or something like that.
So I'm trying to get at, so say they got a 10-year sentence and the license expired the first year of their sentence. They would have 3 years of being incarcerated. That they would be eligible that within that 3 years or after that 3 years. Within that 3 years to get it at no cost. After that, they would have to pay.
They wouldn't actually be eligible in that scenario for a license if they were incarcerated for 10 years. Because in theory, their license had expired as well as extended past the 3 years. So they would need to get a non-driver and retest.
I think one thing that is missing from the current language is the current language doesn't specify that it has to be pending, as you're approaching release. But in that 10-year scenario, under the existing language in the draft, theoretically, if you read the language strictly, they could seek to reapply or renew their license mid-sentence, but they would actually run into a problem at the end of their 10-year sentence because every 9 years you need a new photo to comply with federal requirements. And so they could have, under the existing language in the bill, they could renew their license, but then they wouldn't actually be able to have a valid license on leaving because their photo would have expired. And that's part of, that's one of the things that's, there is language in here that says if eligible, so that to capture caveats like that where, you actually need to go to a DMV location to get a new photo taken, to get this updated. But I do think if your intent is that this is only provided upon release, that you should specify a time period leading up to release when they can seek this renewal.
This is talking the language in C1 with that hasn't expired more than 3 years is for people who are not incarcerated. Because most people, what's Monique or Allie, can you mention what the average length of incarceration is? I hate to say that. Is it 2 years, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years? It varies.
It varies. There are some people who get a sentence of 6 months, but we have people who are in for life.
Yeah, I don't know
And-
what that is.
And
We'd have to-
it's probably 5 years. Like
but they
broadly
reach their
speaking,
minimum.
5 years.
But they reach their minimum.
Mhm.
Because at their minimum, they're eligible for release.
Well, right. That's the other thing. It's not that the person gets sentenced to 5 years and they're in jail for 5 years. They get sentenced to 5 years. They are eligible to get released at their minimum, which most of them elect to do. And they go out to some kind of community supervision. And ultimately, almost all of them come back. And we see them come back in and released to furlough or parole or probation again. Then they violate, and then they go back in. They typically do that till the end of their sentence.
Didn't realize.
So how does that 3-year timeframe work on the DOC end for folks? They come in with a valid driver's license and then it expires.
Mhm.
Of course, they have to be there 6 months and they could be detained for 6 months as a detainee and then get sentenced. So if they already met that 6-month threshold, because they haven't been committed to the imprisonment, 6 months or more committed to the custody. So that would include the 6 months they were detained. Then they're
Correct.
sentenced. How does that 3-year window work in corrections world? to renew a license? Don't know.
Well, we haven't done it.
They had mentioned, DOC had mentioned yesterday in testimony that they don't have access to
like
the web.
it's a helicopter. It's been doing it for days.
It's they've been flying Blackhawks back and forth.
Really? Who's been flying?
I,
Who's fly top? Is that Army?
It's right there.
Marines.
Yeah. That's.
But we don't have Marines in
That's on
Vermont.
FlightAware anyway.
yeah,
So it's, why is that happening right next to the Capitol? Anyway,
Oh, no.
moving on.
They want to issue driver's license.
Yeah.
We want to get released, no, like us.
entertaining my daughter yesterday, so
Yeah.
They were yesterday?
yeah,
Yeah.
like 5:30.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just doing stuff.
yeah.
Right, they're doing stuff, that's the concern, what stuff? Um,
I'm gonna get you.
so I don't disagree with the philosophy of trying to help somebody if they have a valid driver's license and they become incarcerated. The driver's license expires while they're incarcerated. And it hasn't been expired more than 3 years. So you got a 3-year window that you could reapply. How is it going to work in DOC's world? We don't know. Right? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
There's the committee.
Well, you're keeping a tight rein on it, and so I have a question that I want to ask council about the miscellaneous bill, but it's like, there's now the time.
Part of the miscellaneous bill.
Well, the initial language included detainees by mistake. They
Well,
got,
we took that out.
yeah, but so why? Because it was.
Because it's
because
hard for,
complicated,
it's
'cause
hard for
yeah.
DOC to know when a detainee leaves.
Well, that's my question. Yeah, so it was a logistical issue, not an
Yeah.
objection or,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it was like, you know, a detainee could be there for 3 weeks or a
Yeah.
month. And their license expires within that time, but DOC, they could be released right from the court. DOC knows nothing when they are released. That's more, and if they're a detainee and they're released within a month and their driver's license expired, by the time DOC does the work to get the information to DMV, they're already out the door. So that's why it was taken out. Was there something else there, Brian, as well?
No, I just wondered, I was inquiring about the discussion, if there are other reasons or if that's a good reason, but.
So where's the committee on this one for 3 years? Sure.
I not knowing impact on DOC administratively. I don't know if that's factoring into it for me. My apologies to DOC. Just because, you know, this isn't going to surprise anybody. Any hurdles that we can remove from a smooth reentry process, for me, is an obligation that we have. And this is doing that prospectively, or yeah. So yeah, I'm in favor of what we're doing.
Yeah, folks.
I think it's fine.
Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Troy just said.
Other folks? Keep the language as is for
Yep.
3 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kevin? You're struggling?
I'm not struggling. I think we ought to tell our lawyers what we'd like to see and let them come up with the language that's compatible. I think we want to say anyone that's been detained for more than 6 months, we want them to be able to receive the highest level of documentation that DOC can provide and let them figure out how to do it. That's what I'd like to see. If it's a driver's license or a non-driver's license,
or real or not.
Or whatever,
Yeah.
let them just do what the system does, but tell them what we want. That's what I think we should do. I don't think we can parse this ourselves, but I'm the newbie here.
Well, we can, and then they'll tell us it's wrong.
So the language is before us is to allow folks who are sentenced to renew their license while they're incarcerated. If it expires, they can do it right then and there. Or if it has been expired for no more than 3 years. So if they came in with an expired license that's a year old, and they were held in sentence for 2 more years, could they renew that expired license? Because they didn't come in with their license had been expired a year prior to their incarceration, or
Does not require them. The current language here does not require that their license be unexpired when they entered. If that were the committee's wish, I would rewrite this.
No.
no. So it could, a person's license could be expired.
Mhm.
Just a 3-year window.
Yeah.
That's what it is for us.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
That's right.
I may be jumping ahead of you. Are we adding detainees now to the
I don't
Senate?
think so.
language?
I don't think so, because I think the DOC detainees would be an issue on your end, wouldn't it?
Yes.
That's mom. Yeah.
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, let's keep going.
Okay. So with the replacement licenses there, right now, the language allows you to, if you have either an unexpired license or one that expired not more than 3 years prior, to be eligible to apply for a replacement license. And then upon proper application and submission of documentation for either a non-real ID or real ID, and in advance of release, be provided with the replacement operator's license for a fee of $0. And this is at any time right now, as it's written during the period of incarceration. So that is a question of, do you want to leave that as at any time or as they're nearing release, whether that's on furlough or, the end of their sentence. And I am way out of my lane with understanding the nuances of that. So I want to defer to Hillary and DOC to identify issues with that could arise from that, at any time language now versus time limiting it to a specific window. And then the other piece here is then you just have to provide proof of Vermont residence, which under the current provision, as I understand it, is where they're going to be once they're released. And the mailing address upon release from custody, which does seem to contemplate that this is as you're nearing release, whether that's on furlough or for the end of your sentence. Or parole. Again, I'm out of my. They may not be correct, so please bear with me here. It then goes to reentry planning, provides that as part of reentry planning, DOC would inquire with the individual regarding whether they would like, if eligible, to obtain an operator's license. And again, I would recommend that you say, or other credential from the Department of Motor Vehicles pursuant to the provisions of this section, and then provide information regarding documentation and associated costs. And then the last subdivision here, number 4, just provides that if the individual wants to obtain that license, then DOC would coordinate with DMV to provide that license to the individual at the time they're released from custody. So again, everything except that opening language seems to contemplate that as we're approaching release, understanding that when you're incarcerated, you're not driving on a public highway. So,
That's what I was gonna say.
So the kicker is if the license is more than, once it reaches 9 years old, then you have to go in for a photo.
yeah, so
And there's no photo on the non-driver ID.
there is,
So how do you get the photo on a non-driver ID? Right now, for someone
Our
who's,
process with DOC, we actually have a system worked out where they're the ones that have the particulars of what we need, and they're sending us the photo file.
so could that be done in the driver, in this section here as well? Where driver's license is over 9 years old?
presumably, if that's already in place, then my concern earlier is
That's what,
probably,
Monique, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, we could absolutely take photos. Like, there's already a process in place. Everybody knows how to do it. I don't see that that would be a problem at all.
Because we worked through that about 7 years ago, 6, 7 years ago, pre-COVID, to make sure that the photo things could work between, we did that in this committee pre-COVID.
And our current process and the language that I'm understanding is about upon release.
Right.
So if we are talking, I'm just gonna, if I could, just throw it out there. If we are talking about license renewals while they are incarcerated and where DMV is paying that fee for potentially a larger bulk of individuals, that might need to be vetted. Because that isn't something that we have considered. We were still, I believe our language was in regards to upon release.
yeah. So with that in mind, I might suggest tightening up the language just a little bit, just to ensure that, I think you can read the implication in from the other subdivisions, but I might recommend that Hillary and I work together to tighten up the language just to ensure we're capturing folks who are nearing release.
Through those discussions, I was under the understanding that it was a release time, 6 months before.
Well, and given that fact, maybe perhaps I'm belaboring a point because I'm missing it. We're not saying that somebody who's in for 25 years, it's on the shoulders of DOC and DMV to renew every few for them. They get to the end of their long stretch and then it's time for a non-driver's ID and start all over again. We're not gonna, yeah.
That was our intent of our language, and our current intent as well as the expansion. It is absolutely, you're right.
Yeah, okay.
I don't think we had thought of
Right.
going down that path.
I don't have any.
I missed part of that question because I was thinking, and this may be the question. So their license expired a long time ago, like 2 years into their sentence, but they have a minimum of 12 years. And they are getting near the time to be released. They want a driver's license. They would be eligible for one. Would they be able to apply for one or not? But if your license expires and then 10 years later you want a driver's license, you have to start from scratch.
Retest after 3 years. Okay.
Yep. I also want to point out the existing language for the non-driver ID addresses this. It says that upon proper application and in advance of release from a correctional facility. So
That's what you
it
want.
clarifies it. I think the issue here came out of me trying to formulate the language for the other two and not tracking this. And I left that part out. So I think I inadvertently created the loophole that I just pointed out to all of you. So
So you take that up.
It's a living.
it happens.
We don't know.
We understand this discussion. as
Yeah.
well.
So I apologize for
Don't,
bogging you down with that piece too.
So if they renew while they're incarcerated, which is close to their time of release,
Yeah.
and their driver's license has expired, but it's not more than 3 years, they can renew it at no cost.
We will give them the highest credential that they are eligible for at the time of release.
How much would it cost DMV to issue the driver's license? And would it be,
A credential's a credential, $3.30 plus postage plus personnel.
regardless?
Credential.
And it doesn't matter if it's the enhanced or the.
No enhanced.
Oh,
Okay,
No. Enhanced is the chip to go to Canada, border crossing. No.
so it's gotta be, so it's gotta be, a real ID,
Yes,
you don't have a non-real ID driver's
Yes,
license.
we do.
Do that,
it's called a privilege card.
right, the non-real
Non-real.
ID.
Yeah,
Privilege cards.
So then we'd have to clarify,
yeah.
so we would need to clarify language here, which driver's license is really referring to.
It's all gonna depend upon what DOC is able to get for the highest vetted documents. They get what they are able to, we will provide the highest credential type pending on what their eligibility as well as what documents are provided.
So you could issue an enhanced driver's license.
We will not be issuing an enhanced driver's license because there is an additional $30 fee for the chip for the crossing of the border. DMV is not, it has not been part of that language. Real ID, yes.
So what if the person comes in with a valid driver's license that is the enhanced driver's license? It expires within this window and is eligible to renew that same driver's license.
They could go for the real ID driver's license, but they can't. I don't think this
Well, they
contemplates a
can't.
no charge
Of course.
enhanced.
Of
Yeah,
course, because they're gonna be coming in
Yeah.
theory and working through.
Just putting out all the scenarios there.
yeah, but
folks.
this isn't,
To prepare for questions on the floor, because everybody has a driver's license.
yeah, this is not contemplating a no charge enhanced driver's license. So,
You want that, it's on their own, right?
Yeah, just playing out the scenarios. I want things covered, because everybody holds a driver's license and they're gonna ask questions on the floor. And whoever's reporting this, because I'm not reporting it, whoever's reporting this needs to know these answers. And this is where you
Does
get,
everybody feel comfortable with understanding an enhanced driver's license is a real ID, but an enhanced driver's license is a chip inside the credential that allows for Border Patrol prior to getting up there, read your information and it comes up on the system. Right?
Yes, yeah.
Just want to make sure.
Yep.
Right? Just to help clarify.
That is
and it's a $30 extra charge for that,
That is correct. For any of us.
for any of us, right?
Any of us.
How far away are they reading that from?
I don't know. That's not my lane.
That's why the Blackhawks are here.
That is-
Just wondering.
Shall
I
I drop it on
do
another
know that
paper?
when we're at the stop zone, at the stop, there's always a car in front of us. I do know they're picking it up from that point. I don't know how far back in line when the lines are.
Oh,
I don't know the answer.
All right,
to
so
that.
they're
They
seeing
already
the-
have you pulled up
Who
before
would
you
be,
get there.
who would be picking it up, DMV?
Oh.
Border
No,
Patrol.
no,
Oh, Border
Border
Patrol.
Patrol, when you're crossing the lines.
all right, well, that's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. And you all can be our DMV advocates out there, helping our friends and family.
There you go.
So I'm gonna ask the security question at DOC on this.
30 feet. 30
No,
feet.
I'm gonna ask the security question, DMV.
It is 30 feet.
And I just want to put this on the table. I don't think it's an issue. Person comes in, they have an enhanced driver's license. They meet all the requirements here, renew it, they want an enhanced. But they're on furlough and you've got some strict restrictions on them. Is there anything that DOC would get in the way of the person getting that enhanced driver's license? Because I'm sure there's folks out there right now with enhanced driver's license that are on furlough or parole.
Probably. Yeah, DOC wouldn't do anything to not allow them to get it.
Okay, so you're gonna finagle the language a little bit here, Damien, tighten it up, make sure it tracks a little bit with current law. Let's go to learner's permit, which is probably married mirrored,
is-
similar to the
Yep.
driver's license.
It mirrors the driver's license, so. If you go down to, first it's subdivision 4, this is broken out slightly different than driver's license, just because of the way the fees are set out in the learner's permit section. So this would provide that if you get a replacement learner's permit issued under the section related to individuals who are serving a sentence, then the fee would be $0. Then going down to the individuals serving a sentence, the language mirrors what we see for the driver's licenses. Again, it needs the same fix that we have to say in advance of release. Yep, beyond that, they're required to provide proof of Vermont residence and their mailing address upon release, documentation necessary for a real or non-real ID. And then DOC, as part of reentry planning, is required to inquire with them. And again, I would recommend replacement learner's permit or other credential issued by the Department of Motor Vehicles pursuant to the provisions. And we'll finagle that language to make it a little bit better. And then again, if they do want to obtain a replacement learner's permit, DOC would coordinate with DMV to provide that permit at the time the individual is released.
There are many people coming into corrections with a learner's permit. I can't imagine that.
I don't know that I've ever seen it.
But you just want to track it.
I think it's our intent to just give the highest credential that an individual is eligible for to help with their success upon reentry.
What identification, if any, do you need for a permit, driver's permit? Do you need anything?
Yes, same information that you do for any of our credentials. So depending if you're going for real ID or non-real ID, your residency, your social security, your birth certificate.
So they have the same delineation for a
We do.
learner's permit?
We do.
Should we indicate that too? Again, or not? Just leave it the way it is? I saw Nancy say no.
It's the same.
Yeah,
It's 2014.
It's always in most of our lives.
I left that out. I would just say like the same documentation, yeah.
And again, if they qualify or if they, it's whatever they had is what they're going to get unless they have additional documentation to upgrade.
Yeah.
That's-
honestly.
Be prepared. Somebody here is gonna report this thing.
We are.
Looking at the
So I'm gonna
sky.
chair Emmons.
No, I'm not doing it. Not on the capital bill to do. Not doing it.
Okay.
I don't. This one's gonna take some debate on the floor. Is my thinking, because everybody has a driver's license. That's it, right? Because we're not talking about anything else. So Damien and Hillary, you're gonna work up a new draft of this, and you're gonna use you can use 549 as the vehicle.
Yeah, I think the plan in the Senate Transportation is whatever you put in 549, they are going to drop that into the miscellaneous motor vehicle bill that they've got. And they're hoping to do that at the end of next week after they hear from the chair.
So the one thing, and I'm gonna leave this up to you two to clarify, we have to make sure we use the right terminology when we talk about individual sentenced, offender, inmate. There is in statute a definition. Offender means someone who has been adjudicated and is serving a sentence. Inmate means offender and includes the sentenced person as well as the detainee.
We will likely stick with individual who is sentenced or individual who is detained for that reason, but we will pay close attention. That's what I actually love.
It's been going back and forth here for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Things.
And it's worth noting if we did use something like offender, we would want to cross-reference wherever that's defined, because in Title 23, it's not.
Right.
And so for purposes of Title 23, that's a term where, there would be questions about interpretation unless we reference the definition of it wherever it is.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure that I want to add offender to the
No,
88 definitions for Title 23 that are in Section 4. So,
you folks can figure that out. So do either one of you have any policy questions that we need to resolve before the next draft?
Their understanding what the committee would like for original H-49 purposes.
yeah, I think I have a clear understanding too. I think I need to talk to DMV about the learner's permit section. And this is probably more of a transportation committee issue, but it strikes me that the statutory language may not reflect their current documentation requirements. And I'm wondering if we just want to update that for clarity's sake. I need to read it a little bit closer when I'm not trying to follow a conversation. But I just want to make sure that that's the case. So you may see a little bit of additional language that appears in both drafts that just says, real ID or non-real ID documentation.
And then one timing question, if I may. I believe I'm scheduled for a walkthrough of amended language for H-549 on Tuesday. I just want to make sure that whatever changes are required for the Senate bill language. We'll work for those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I believe they're asking Chair Emmons to come in on Wednesday.
Yep. Wednesday
And then
morning.
this morning they discussed hoping to finalize their language by the end of next week, assuming that timeline works for this committee too.
So they may want to amend a little bit of what we proposed as well. You know?
They have there's motor vehicle inspections provision that's subject to a public hearing the following week. So their bill will be open for another week after that, but they're hoping to button up as much of the bill as they can and just leave the inspections, because that's, as all of you can imagine.
So is there anything for this language right now, or what we've discussed, that will go in a new draft? Anything that we've discussed for DOC or DMV that you see as flags, or are you both comfortable with the language that we've discussed and are proposing?
We just, council wasn't here yesterday, so just as what I brought forward yesterday in testimony was DMV would request, instead of passing, if this goes forward, not having upon passage versus giving us that time to January 1st, 2027, specifically regarding detainees.
To get your IT system.
Get the system up.
Yeah, that is correct. So.
So it'd only be for the detainee portion of the non-driver ID.
549.
And the rest can take effect July 1st.
That's in our miscellaneous.
Yeah, whatever it is. Anything on DOC's part? Monique?
No, I don't think so. It's just a small expansion of the process that we're already doing. But I did email the person who who actually does the paperwork and processing. And I asked her to connect with our surrounding states to find out what would be required to have an inmate get a birth certificate. They won't give it to DOC. So she's asking, okay, if you can't give it to DOC, how does my inmate get one?
Yeah.
So maybe we can expand that process.
Thank you, Monique, on that. Anything else before we take this back up on Tuesday afternoon?
Fantastic.
It'd be great. I don't know if you can do it, Hillary, or Damien can provide backup this time. I'm not sure.
fair that I should go in the hot seat next time. Kate and I will coordinate about this way to.
I will happily sit on the side next time.
Anything else from the committee before we wrap it up? Okay, thank you, Damian. Thank you, Hillary.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Nancy, Haley, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're done for the week. I bet you everybody's glad. Bet you this was torture for everyone.
Don't be too hard tomorrow.
I'm not doing anything tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Staying put.
Coming down.
Go, God. One more job.
Yes, I'm coming down for a surprise party.
So we're back here on Tuesday, the 17th, and,